Okay, guys, got a great episode in store for you today. A lot of energy, high energy Tay-Tay today. And I am in the car because I couldn't go to my studio, my house. But this episode, I talk again about the situation going on at the Joe Rogan Experience. Sober October, the conflict between Ari Shaffir and Bert Kreischer, and what I think about that. I also talk about what I think about Joe Rogan and his friends. I think some of his talk about having friends is a little bullshitty. Anyway, then I talk about politicians and how I think politicians should all have to fight. So, do you want to hear about my opinions? Of course you do. That's why you're listening to this. Check out my website, tstuch.com, tstuch.com. Email me, tayradio1@gmail.com. Follow me on Twitter, tstuch1. Follow me on YouTube, Taylor Stuch, TAYLORSTUCH. Subscribe. And thank you for listening. Enjoy. Another weekend episode. Let's do it. So, I got the pleasure of listening to the entire Sober October episode from Joe Rogan's, the Joe Rogan Experience. And what do I think about it? So, for one, I'll tell you guys straight up. I'll tell you straight up, bros and female listeners, that everybody goes after Bert so hard. Everyone goes after Bert Kreischer so fucking hard. If you guys are familiar with the Joe Rogan podcast, or I mean, if you're not familiar, sometimes right now they're doing a Sober October challenge. I think I talked about this in a previous podcast, but it's him, a guy named Bert Kreischer, Tom Segura, and Ari Shaffir. And Ari Shaffir drugged one of his friends, Bert Kreischer, during his podcast. And I'll tell you what, it was really interesting to see the reaction, because Bert was very upset that Ari Shaffir drugged him. Ari Shaffir drugged him with Molly, which is it's like a party drug, and he was really upset. One, because of course, you just don't want to get drugged by your friend and not know it. But also because Bert is on heart medication. And so, I don't know if it's heart medication. I think it's either that or cholesterol. Basically, Bert is having some health issues. So he's on some medication for that. And when he found out that Ari Shaffir drugged him on Molly, he was like, holy shit. And he freaked out because he was like, in his mind, and this is possible, right? He was concerned that maybe the Molly could interact with his medication and fuck him up and kill him and give him a stroke. And so basically he was beside himself with anger and disbelief that his friend would put him in that position. And what was going on throughout the whole podcast was that Bert kept bringing it up. And I gotta be straight. Okay, so Bert would bring it up. And then Shaffir would, and this is just his way of doing stuff, is he wouldn't really apologize. He kept making a joke out of it, kept talking shit about it. And if you don't really understand their dynamic or what's going on, it would be really easy to go, oh, Ari Shaffir is an absolute piece of shit. And he might be. I'm not going to describe, necessarily go into that too much, because he might just be a total piece of shit. That being said, he is pretty funny, and you do get to like him when you hear him sometimes on the Joe Rogan Experience. I used to listen to him on his own podcast called Skeptic Tank, and he was just so unapologetic, which I was not cool with. So, for one, I think that if a friend does something like that to you, it's not okay. I mean, I think everybody knows this, right? If a friend or anybody were to slip you drugs, right, that's not okay. And so Bert was, of course, upset. What was surprising to me was how little Joe Rogan defended Bert. So I think Bert expected Joe and Tom to be more angry at Ari. Now, Tom Segura, in my opinion, did put up more of a defense for Bert, or actually was more on Bert's side, it seemed like. But Joe didn't really say much about it, which was surprising to me. And I gotta be honest, not a big fan of that kind of behavior. He kind of called out Ari in his own little way, telling Ari, like, hey man, don't do that again. You know, that's not cool. You know, hell yeah, don't do that again. But nobody was really holding Ari's feet to the fire and like, dude, you need to fucking apologize. That was fucked up. And it's interesting to see that. People in the comments, so I was really interested to read the comments. So, in the comments section, people were kind of shitting on Rogan and Shafir, and they were like, yeah, the only true friend in there, the only true friends in there are Bert and Tom. Because, you know, don't get me wrong, Tom wasn't necessarily on top of Shafir, but he was on Bert's side a lot more than Joe Rogan was. And Joe, like I said, Joe definitely made his position known. He made it well known that he did not approve of what Shafir did. But in my opinion, Shafir should have gotten more. I mean, honestly, he deserved to at least get his ass kicked. And what I think they should probably do, no, they're not going to hear this, but what I think they should do is have a fight. Not a serious fight, but like a boxing wrestling match. And either that or Shafir should let Bert punch him in the face. So that's my opinion, is that's how that should be resolved. On the other hand, it's a trend that I kind of noticed is, you know, I love the Joe Rogan experience, and I think the value that Joe has brought to the world is way beyond what it's way beyond what these kinds of things that I don't like are. So I don't like the way he didn't defend his friend well enough, but you know, at the same time, it's like the value he does bring to me and a lot of millions and millions of other listeners outstrips him not being, in my opinion, the best friend to Bert Kreischer. Maybe not. Maybe I need to rethink that. Maybe that doesn't fall in line with skin in the game, or what, you know, Taleb would deem a true friend. But regardless of that, I guess here's one of my assessments of Joe Rogan. Love Joe, but I don't think he has a lot of true friends. One reason I say that is because he says that he loves everybody all the time, and he always talks about how he's got all these friends. And what I mean is he says that everyone is his friend. Like, he'll have people on and be like, oh, you're my friend, you're my friend, you're my friend. And it's like, that's something that's always bothered me about him, is that, no, dude, they're not your friend. You know, like he had Steven Crowder on one time and they got into it over pot. And he totally was being an asshole to Crowder about the pot issue. And the whole time, he's like trying to be like, well, you know, we're friends. And it's like, no, dude, you're not really friends. Like, you've met each other a couple times. You might like each other's content, but you're not really friends. He does that with a lot of guys that come on his podcast. A lot of guys are his quote unquote friends, but I just don't really think they're really friends. I think a lot of them are acquaintances. And I feel like he overuses the term, and I think it deludes in my opinion, it deludes a bit of the perception of him. While I'm on this subject, I hate the way he treats Brian Callen. I know that him and Brian have been friends for like a long fucking time, but whenever Brian Callen and him and like Brendan Schaub or somebody else are on a podcast, and there's like 3 or 4 of them, like Eddie Bravo, Brendan, and all of them, it's everyone just shits on Brian Callen, And I do get some of it. Brian gets a little too fucking academic and just regurgitates a lot of quote-unquote knowledge that he just, like, reads from stuff. But, you know, whatever. But I do think a lot of people shit on him, and I think Joe shits on him a lot. And then Joe also shits on Bert a lot in the podcast, which is not cool. But, you know, anyway, I still love the podcast. I just think you kind of got to understand the dynamics there and understand what you're listening for. You know, I think Joe Rogan's probably a great parent. I think he's probably a great father, probably a great husband. He's a great businessman in certain respects. I just think that his quote-unquote friendships are not as deep as we think. So let's go ahead and get some sponsorships going, and I will come back with some more commentary. Hey everybody, do you want to record your own podcast like me? Well, Anchor is a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing your podcast. Best of all, it's 100% free and ridiculously easy to use. And now, Anchor can match you with great sponsors who want to advertise on your podcast. That means you get paid to podcast right away. In fact, that's what I'm doing right now by reading this ad. That's right, mofos. It's easy. Check it out. So, earlier, I talked about how I think Bert and Ari Shaffir should fight each other because Ari spiked one of Bert's drinks on their podcast with drugs, and Ari wouldn't really apologize. So I think they should have to fight each other. You know, I don't know. I just think that's how it should be settled. That being said, it reminded me of what I think a lot about politicians. So I know it might seem like kind of a stretch, but here it goes. Basically, one thing that really pisses me off about politicians is that, this is more of a national thing. I'm really not a big fan of national policies. And even at the state level, there was just a policy proposal, or a governor was about to sign some legislation in California that is going to make it to where freelancers can't freelance anymore. Like, they've got to be hired on, like you can't hire freelancers, I guess, in California to be writers anymore. You'd have to hire them as employees, which means a lot of people are going to lose their freelance work. So a lot of people are not going to get paid for their writing. And basically, I think it's the governor of California is about to sign it into law, and it's kind of like the people that do that stuff that affect so many people with such negative consequences. It's like those kind of motherfuckers need to be subjected to a beatdown. And I guess it might come off as violent, like, oh, why do you want to beat up people or beat up politicians? It's like, no, I just feel as though too many politicians, too high up in the chain, don't ever face consequences for their actions, right? Like, the governor of California isn't going to have to live with the fact that he doesn't get paid for freelance writing gigs anymore, right? The same, and they're trying to do a lot of stuff with contract work around the country. A lot of people survive off contract work, whether it be a driver, a writer, a mover, just, you know, lots and lots of work in the U.S., consultants, you know, people that are quote-unquote consultants. I work my primary income is contract labor, you know, contract work. But anyway, what I'm getting at is that you have all these politicians who are disconnected from the rest of the people that they are quote-unquote presiding over. Because that's how it is. It's like the politicians in this country view themselves as a ruling fucking class. You know, they don't view themselves as the people. They don't view themselves as beholden to the people. They're all, most of them, caught myself there, about to say they're all, most of them are pieces of shit and want to give you rules that you have to abide by, that they don't have to abide by. And that makes me want to fight them. And I cannot tell you how many times I have wanted to get in the ring with a politician and beat the living shit out of them. Because that's what most of them deserve. A lot of politicians need to be subjected to a kickboxing match. Not a jiu-jitsu match where they get twisted up into a pretzel and they can tap out. I mean, they need to get punched in the face so they get to feel reality. Because too many of these politicians, like, you know what? You know who comes to mind? Is Paul Ryan. So I vote Republican usually. But Paul Ryan is a bitch boy. Paul Ryan is somebody that needs to get in the ring with a kickboxer or somebody who can fight and take some shots. He needs to get leg kicked, or he just needs to get side kicked in the ribs. He needs to get a stiff, straight right cross to the face. He needs to feel reality. You know who else needs to feel reality? All the politicians, and especially the female politicians. So, and I say that because I feel like currently we hold, I'm all for equal rights and everything, but I feel like I just feel like with women, sometimes there's not enough of a threat of physical violence. I'm not saying anyone should attack these people, but they need to have reality sometimes in their face. So I think female politicians need to get in the ring with female fighters, and they need to say, okay, look, when you next time you decide that you're going to talk shit about all these people, all these millions of people in the United States who are getting up every day and working their asses off to pay the fucking taxes to the government so you can keep your job, you need to remember every time you get punched in the face that there's all these people out here that are working their asses off to make the country run. Because those politicians, male and female, they're not making the country run. They're not running the country. They're just living off the perks of everyone. They're living off the fruits of everyone else's labor. And they need to know that. And they need to be reminded of that. So that's why I say we need a new policy. And you know what? I'm sorry. It doesn't matter how old you are, male or female, what's going on. I don't care what your religious affiliation is. All politicians should be subjected to a kickboxing fight. Now, that doesn't mean they all need to get in the ring all the fucking time and get their asses kicked, but they all need to get in the ring and they need to fight. And we need to figure out the details of it, but everyone should need to. It's kind of like how in a previous, because what basically people need to face reality. There needs to be an idea of there are real consequences to actions. And that's one thing I like about fighters. That's one thing I like about, I guess, also people that were in the military, is that people that fought or were in the military or entrepreneurs or just regular working people, we all have to face the consequences of our actions, right? If a fighter gets in the ring and does something stupid, he's going to get knocked out, right? He's going to lose. He's going to get his ass kicked. If a guy in the military does something stupid, he might get shot or killed. If somebody, a business owner or a regular working class dude, makes a big mistake, he's got to face real consequences. So these politicians need to face consequences too. Maybe every time they get elected, they have to get into the ring. And, I'm not saying they all need to get knocked out and they all need to be in full contact sparring matches, but they all need to be in there needs to be substantial contact. There needs to be substantial physical contact. They need to get punched. They need to get kicked. And if they can't handle it, then they shouldn't be in it. Either that or they need to subject themselves to another physical treatment. So physical treatment, what I mean, I think all presidential candidates should have to go through a 3 or 4 tiered system of competition. And the competition, first, second, or third, doesn't determine your eligibility. But you have to engage in the competition. And so everyone gets to see how you react under pressure. And I remember one of them was a strength competition. So they need to do at least 1 or 2 lifts, like deadlift or and bench press, something like that. And they need to do a endurance run. So like long distance trail running, none of this track bullshit, long distance in the trails, real hazards. There needs to be a long-form interview, minimum of an hour and a half. And it needs to be with a good interviewer. Number 3, and then the fourth one, they all need to do a stand-up comedy set. They all need to do it. So that way they can be heckled and laughed at and people can talk shit to them. They all need to be embarrassed. Everyone needs to get their ass shit-talked in order to be a politician in this country. Then, that's presidential shit. I'd say congressional and House stuff, you need to get in the ring, or you need to... here's my thing. Here's what I would say. If you were an entrepreneur, if you were a fighter, or if you were in the military, then you can forego this. However, if you were not in the military, did not start a business, and or did not... and maybe have a family too, right? Because you got to have real skin in the game, right? You need to, like, your decisions are going to impact people. So maybe you should have to have a family. If you don't have a family, you weren't an entrepreneur, you didn't serve in the military, and you were never a fighter, then you have to get in the ring and have a kickboxing fight every time you get elected, and or you have to go through the four qualifications, just like the president would. That's what I say. Fuck all this. I'm gonna talk my way into my political position. Everyone needs to have skin in the game. So that's what I gotta say today. It's Sunday. I'm feeling feisty because I got injured, so I can't go to the gym. So I got some energy. Plus I had a latte a couple hours ago. Maybe that did something too. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and you can go to my website, tstutch.com. You can follow me on Twitter, tstutch1. You can email me at tayradio.com, T-A-Y, radio1@gmail.com. You can follow me on Periscope, where I do live broadcast almost 5 days a week at tstutch1. Check out my YouTube, Taylor Stutch, Taylor space Stuch. Check it out.